The raccoon arrived on a Thursday night, just before the first show. The drive-in sat at the very edge of town, where the asphalt turned into fields and the sky stopped pretending to belong to anyone. A big white screen rose from the grass like a misplaced billboard. Speakers hung from metal poles. The snack bar sat in the middle, low and square, with a neon sign that hummed more than it glowed. Most nights, the routine never changed. Families drove in with kids in pajamas. Old trucks rolled up with lawn chairs and coolers. Teenagers tried to look bored and failed. The same movies played in the same order: action, romance, horror, whatever the studio sent. People watched, laughed, cried a little, went home. Life stayed mostly the same the next morning. The owner, an older man named Carl, liked the comfort of that rhythm. The drive-in did not make much money anymore, but it was predictable. Tickets, popcorn, soda, lights off, lights on, credits rolling across the same white surface. Then the raccoon found the hole in the fence. The hole was not special. A loose board, a gap where the nails had rusted out. Foxes had used it. Stray cats, too. But none of them had ever walked in like they had bought a ticket. This raccoon walked. It slipped under the fence with hardly any sound, shook dust from its fur, and sat up on its back legs for a better look. The dark mask around its eyes made it look like it was already part of the night. Its paws were quick and careful, like small hands that had been busy in many kitchens. It sniffed the air: buttered popcorn, hot oil, warm sugar, cut grass. A faint smell of gasoline and warm metal from the cars lined up in loose rows. The raccoon moved toward the snack bar first, because that was where the strongest scent lived. Inside, workers rushed to fill orders before the show. They didn't see the striped tail slide under the back step. The raccoon found a spot behind a crate of extra cups and sat there, listening. Grease popped. Ice clinked into cups. The neon sign buzzed over the door. When the overhead lights dimmed and the first trailers started to roll, the raccoon moved again. It followed the sound. The movie that night was a big studio fantasy. There was a chosen one. There was a final battle. There was a village that needed saving from something large, loud, and full of flame. The raccoon found the projector room. The door was closed, but the lower corner of the frame had rotted a little. Years of damp air and forgotten repairs had chewed at the wood. With some work, a determined animal could squeeze through. The raccoon was a very determined animal. It pressed its body flat, pushed, twisted, and slid between the frame and the wall like a stripe of shadow. The projector room smelled like hot glass and old dust. The projector itself hummed and whirred, throwing a beam of light through a small square in the back wall toward the screen. On a table beside it sat a scattered pile of things that did not belong to any machine. Old ticket stubs, a key ring with broken keys, a stack of posters from movies that had played and gone, a jar filled with bottle caps, a bowl where someone had once kept candy and now kept only wrappers. The raccoon climbed onto the table. It reached into the bowl, turned over a wrapper, tasted it, lost interest. Its paws touched an old ticket with a faded date. The paper crackled under its weight. Dust shifted in the air. On the screen outside, the hero of the story was running toward a hopeless fight. Parents in cars leaned forward. Kids whispered and stared. Teenagers who had seen the movie already waited for the big scene near the end. The one with the sacrifice everyone talked about online. In the projector room, The raccoon shuffled past the tickets and knocked a few off the table. Nothing changed at first. The beam of light stayed steady. The reel spun. The soundtrack rolled over the speakers. Then, very slowly, the movie slid sideways. It did not jump. No sudden glitch, no ugly edit. The story simply leaned in a new direction, like a person changing a step mid-stride. The hero reached the final moment. In every version anyone had ever seen, this was the part where he walked alone into the fire, making a noble speech, saving everyone else at his own cost. Cars in the lot went quiet. People waited for the familiar. On the screen, the hero stopped. He looked at the burning gate in front of him. He looked at the frightened village behind him. He looked at the soldiers who had followed him this far and now stood frozen, waiting for someone else to decide what their lives were worth. He did not walk forward. He turned. The camera, in every other cut of this film, was supposed to stay on his back. This time it caught his face instead. Not brave, not calm, just human. Tired eyes, soot on skin, a line at the corner of the mouth that said he had seen too much. He did not give a speech. He pointed at the weak spots in the wall, at the shovels, at the buckets by the well, at the tools no one considered weapons. He started pulling people into motion. The fire still raged. The danger did not shrink. But the story refused to make one person a neat offering that made everyone else feel safe for free. The drive-in audience watched as the village saved itself in a messy, uneven way. Some people did more. Some did less. One old woman with bad knees figured out that wet blankets worked better than brave poses. A kid who had never held anything heavier than a broom turned out to be good at spotting falling beams before they hit anyone. The final shot did not show one grave and a sunset. It showed a line of tired figures sitting on the ground next to each other, all very much alive, staring at the charred gate and realizing their lives would not go back to what they had been before. On the screen, the credits rolled over that image. In the cars, people shifted. Some thought they remembered the scene differently and blamed it on poor memory. Others, who had watched it in theaters months ago, knew something else had happened. They checked their phones. Old reviews still talked about a tragic single death at the end. Fan art on the internet still showed one hero against the flames. What they had just seen did not match any of that. In the projector room, the raccoon blinked at the spinning reel. A moth brushed its whiskers. The raccoon swatted at it, missed, and knocked another handful of old tickets onto the floor. The next weekend, it came back. The hole in the fence had not been fixed. The gap under the projector room door had not been patched. The same habits pulled the animal along the same path. Fence, snack bar, projector, table, small objects that told quiet stories in fading ink. The movie this time was a romance that had been popular for a while. Not special, people said, but sweet enough. Two strangers in a city, a chance meeting, a string of unlucky events. At the end, in the original, one of them moved away and the other stayed behind, standing on a bridge in the rain while the closing song played. The raccoon was there when the rain started to fall on the screen. It was there when the camera followed the character with the suitcase toward the train station. It was there when a small metal charm dropped out of the bowl on the projector room table and rolled toward the beam of light. Outside, something changed in the rhythm again. The character with the suitcase did not board the train. The film did not suddenly turn into a happy ending with flowers and perfect timing. Instead, it refused to pick the usual clean pain. The one who was supposed to leave stopped in the middle of the platform. The other, who was supposed to stay, stopped halfway across the bridge. The camera cut between them once, twice, then moved away from both. It turned toward a small notice board on the wall. It showed a flyer for a night class that had been pinned there in the background as set dressing in the original film. Now the lens paused on it. Then the story quietly jumped forward a year. The couple never reunited. Instead, the audience saw one of them in a different city, in a very ordinary classroom, learning something new and looking less lost. The other was back on the old bridge, but this time during the day, signing a lease for a small shop under it, paint on their hands, plans on the table. They had both kept moving, just not toward each other. The credits rolled over two separate lives that were finally not waiting for one moment to fix everything. In the cars, reactions were mixed. Some people felt cheated. They had expected a reunion. If the movie was going to change, they wanted it to change in that direction. Others felt something quietly click inside them, an odd relief that a love story could end without one person stuck in place forever. Online, arguments flared before the night was even over. Some viewers swore the drive-in had shown a different cut. Others accused them of remembering wrong. Old clips of the rain-soaked original and new recordings from phones sat side by side, refusing to agree. The raccoon did not care about arguments. It cared about the taste of fallen popcorn and the thrill of slipping through gaps meant to keep things out. It kept returning on weekends, like any regular customer who had discovered a place worth visiting again. The movies kept changing. Not every time. Some nights, the story on the screen matched what it was supposed to be, beat for beat. Nothing bent, nothing slid. The end came where the studio had put it. Other nights, something small shifted. In a horror film, the final girl made a decision that did not lead back into the same haunted house for one last scare. She got in the car and drove to a very ordinary motel with bright lights and ugly bedding and never looked back. The danger did not become exciting again. It stayed outside the frame. In a crime drama, the detective who usually threw away the badge at the end did not. They went home, ate something that was not takeout, and called a therapist whose name had flashed on a card in one early scene that no one thought mattered. In a children's movie, the loyal sidekick who always stood in the main character's shadow walked out of the last scene and into a quiet, awkward first day of a new life that was not built around anyone else's adventure. People in the town started to talk. They did not say the raccoon caused it. Most of them did not know about the animal at all. They had not seen the striped tail slip past the edge of the projector room door. They had not seen small paws flip through old tickets, touch bottle caps, send candy wrappers drifting to the floor. They only knew that when they saw certain films at the drive-in, the endings no longer lined up with how they remembered them from streaming or theaters. Some said the drive-in was cursed. Others said it was blessed. Carl, the owner, watched the confusion spread and felt a kind of dread and curiosity at the same time. The bookings were the same. The studio files were the same. The projectors were old but solid. Yet he sat in his office chair after closing and replayed in his mind the new endings he had just watched with his own eyes. The numbers on his spreadsheets did not show any problem. Ticket sales were actually a little better than usual. People came back to see what would happen. Still, the feeling that something had slipped out of his control sat heavy in his chest. On one slow weekday afternoon, he walked the fence line. He found the hole. The earth around it was worn smooth by small bodies. Fur clung to the edges of the boards. He knew raccoon tracks when he saw them. The prints in the dust were clear. He thought about calling someone to trap the animal. He thought about boards and nails and fresh wire. He stood there, staring at the path, for a long minute that tasted like choice. Then he left the gap alone. The raccoon kept coming. Sometimes it sat on top of a car instead of in the projector room. Sometimes it perched on a trash can, masked face turned toward the screen as if taking notes. Children in back seats pointed and laughed when they saw it, and took photos that later turned into blurry streaks of fur in the dark. On a cool autumn evening, the drive-in showed an old disaster movie as a throwback. The film was famous for wiping out almost everyone. Big waves, tall buildings falling, a small group of survivors at the end staring at a ruined skyline while a slow song played. The raccoon was there when the water rose. It was there when the camera moved through scenes of panic and noise. It was there when the final act began, where one well-timed sacrifice was supposed to save a small group at the cost of many others. On the screen, that moment broke. The plans failed. The usual neat shortcut did not work. The single heroic act did not reset the world or wash guilt away. The disaster rolled over the characters in a slower, more honest way. People who had been background faces in the original cut came into focus. A nurse who decided who to help when she could not help everyone. A janitor who knew the building's real structure better than any architect. A neighbor who finally knocked on the door across the hall instead of pretending not to hear cries. At the end, the sky was still damaged. The survivors stood not in a clear, open space, but in a complex, crowded camp where everyone had lost something different. Some held photographs. Some held nothing. There was no sweeping promise that things would be better now, only a quiet, stubborn sense that they would keep going anyway. In the parking lot, people sat in their cars longer than usual after the credits. The raccoon sat on a fence post, washing its paws. The changes did not fix the world. They did not erase grief or loss. They did not turn every sad story into a happy one. They did something smaller and somehow heavier. They refused to let the endings stay lazy. They pulled the lens a little to the side, away from the easy fall guy, the clean sacrifice, the perfect couple, the lone hero, the forever victim. They showed the part of the story where the crowd was not just background, where the weight of choices did not rest on one set of shoulders for everyone's comfort. Over time, the town adjusted. Some people came to the drive-in exactly because the movies were different there. They brought friends and said that the endings hit harder, even when less happened on screen. Others avoided it and watched things at home, where every story behaved as expected. The raccoon did not know any of this. It only knew that the drive-in had food, shadows, small bright things to touch, and a beam of light that painted moving worlds on a big, white wall. It liked the hum and the smell and the way the night felt different when 100 people all held their breath at the same time. One evening, late in the season, a storm rolled in. Clouds stacked over the fields. Wind shook the speaker poles. Carl almost canceled the show. In the end, he decided to run one last double feature before closing for the year. Only a few cars came. The Raccoon came too. This time, it did not go to the projector room. Lightning made the air sharp. The hum of the machine felt brittle, ready to break. Instead, the animal climbed onto the roof of the snack bar and sat there, tail wrapped around itself, watching the screen from above. The movie was small. No heroes, no monsters, no disasters. Just a story about a woman who ran the snack bar at a drive-in that was slowly dying, and the people who still came because they had nowhere else to go. It should have been boring. It was not. Maybe because the Raccoon stayed out of the projector room, the film played straight. No scenes bent, no endings slid. The woman on the screen locked the door at the end of the season, turned off the neon sign, and drove away in an old car that rattled. The camera watched her go, then turned back toward the empty lot and the screen that still held a faint ghost of the last image. The wind howled over the real lot as that scene played. Carl stood under the snack bar roof to stay dry and watched his own life in another color palette on the wall. His hands smelled like oil and sugar. His knees ached. His heart felt too big and too small at once. Up above him, the Raccoon turned its head. It saw the man under the roof. It saw the cars lined up in the wet, windows fogged. It saw the same small movements that always repeated. Someone reaching for a hand, someone wiping their eyes with a sleeve, someone laughing too loudly to hide something else. For a long, slow moment, the animal and the man stared in the same direction. The season ended that night. When spring came back and the grass grew tall around the poles, the town did not know yet whether the drive-in would reopen. Rumors said one thing, then another. Some swore it was done. Others said they had seen Carl at the hardware store buying new boards. The hole in the fence stayed. On some early warm evenings, kids with bikes rode past and peered through the gap. They said they saw a raccoon sitting in the middle of the empty lot, facing the blank white screen, as if waiting for the first frame of a story that had not been written yet. Maybe the movies would change again when the lights came back on. Maybe they would not. But in one small place on the edge of town, where darkness and light met on a flat wall and a strip of stories refused to behave exactly like they were told to, there was now a thin, permanent crack in how endings worked. A silent animal had walked through that crack first. The rest was up to whoever kept watching.